Welcome back to the Big Ben Show, where I'm happy to be joined today by Peter Navarro, Senior Counselor to the President. You can check out all of his work at peternavarro.com, including his latest book, I Went to Prison So You Won't Have to. Thanks so much, Peter, for taking the time to join me today. I found it amusing right off the bat when I was looking at your state of play there in the lead up to your targeted arrest in a very public way, that you actually reside a literal stone's throw from, it seems like, all the different folks in D.C. who spent time in buildings bent on putting you behind bars and going after you in every way possible. Did you just happen to run into them on the street when they were going to lunch, ask them how things were going?
That's a funny story, too, because Merrick Garland actually lived in the same building as I did. There's twin buildings, and he lived in the other twin. I'd look at him get in his little Secret Service car and stuff like that, and I was tempted to give him a piece of my mind. But I mean, if I'd been able to go to Vegas and put a bet down at the beginning of the first term of the Trump administration and say, what are the odds that I'm going to be living in an apartment that I could see 3 government agencies, which would all try to put me in prison, the National Archives, which was like right in front of me, the DOJ, which was on the diagonal, and the FBI, which was on the side, which, by the way, when I was a field goal kicker back in college, I could hit with a field goal from my balcony. I would have been, that would have been bigger than the biggest lotto ticket you could ever imagine. The odds are astronomical. But yeah, I mean, and the problem is, my circus arrest, right, which we're learning a lot about, Ben. I don't know if you've been following it, but Senator Chuck Grassley doing a great job getting whistleblower stuff.
And in fact, it turned out that you had underestimated the degree to which it was a circus.
Yeah. Like the first chapter of I Went to Prison So You Won't Have to is starts with my arrest at Reagan. And I'm doing the TikTok on it. And it's like, I tell about 5 armed FBI agents. Well, we get this whistleblower stuff revealed. And like, this was a big op. They had like a dozen FBI agents out there not looking at trying to get terrorists arrested. They were going after little old me and my fiance, who's like 4'11", for a misdemeanor. And you read the TikTok on it. It's hilarious. Like, Navarro leaves at 9:02, gets into Uber, and then they pick me up, enters north entrance, goes to gate 2. It's like, and then when I was actually there in the airport 2 days before, I'd ask him, I sent a note to the FBI and called him and said, hey, if you need anything, just, you know where I am. It's just, I'm happy to report or do whatever you want. They totally ignored that. But I was thinking, I was like looking at the guy with the garbage sweeper, and, was he an FBI? The typical TV show. They grabbed me, leg irons, handcuffs. CNN had the thing like an hour beforehand and things like that so they could report it immediately. But my case, I mean, look, this is a serious thing, Ben. And I think this is probably the best show to talk about the legality of this. I mean, they arrested me for refusing to testify before Congress after I got a subpoena. Now, if you got a subpoena, Ben, you would have to go or risk prison. But the difference is, I'm a senior White House advisor, and there's this pesky little thing called executive privilege, which goes back to George Washington. And it's been the policy of the Department of Justice across party lines for more than 50 years. If you get a subpoena, you refuse that because you have what's called absolute testimony immunity. And I was weaned on that, Ben. In the first term, when Pelosi got a hold of the Congress and they started handing out the subpoenas like licorice. It was Don McGahn, the White House legal counsel. It was my good buddy at Ledge Affairs, Rick Dearborn. Kellyanne Conway got one. Rob Porter, the staff secretary. I mean, they just tried to get, and every time one of those guys, my good friends and colleagues, got a subpoena, they said, nah, ain't going. Executive privilege, absolute testimony immunity. So, look, I get this subpoena. It was my duty, to honor my oath of office. And it's a big issue, Ben. It's like, if you don't have executive privilege and testimonial immunity, you can't have what the Supreme Court has called, in defense of executive privilege, candor and confidentiality in presidential decision making. So it's a big deal. It's a violation of the separation of powers for Congress to command a member of the White House to go to the Hill and testify. Just like, as George Washington said about the Jay Treaty when this whole concept was done, I can't order any congressman to come to the White House. Yeah. So I'm fighting it. And I don't know if you've been watching the case, but December, Ben, I'm having oral arguments in my appeal. And what's so interesting about that is that the 3-judge panel contains these 2 judges, Patricia Millett and Cornelia Pillar. They're both Democrat appointees, as is the 3rd judge on the 3-judge panel. Now, go back to the days after I got convicted and sentenced to 4 months in prison. The first thing we did, as my legal team did, was ask for what's called release pending appeal. This is almost like a pro forma kind of thing. No flight risk, major constitutional issues that could be overturned on appeal. Well, guess what? Those 2 judges said I had no appealable issues back then. Mm-hmm. And now they're going to be the judges.
They're going to be the judges
who are going to judge my appeal. It's like nuts. Our system is broken. That's what the book I Went to Prison So You Won't Have to is about. It's a wake-up call to America that our system of justice is broken, and that if we don't hold the people accountable who broke it, and I name names in I Went to Prison So You Won't Have to, if we don't hold them accountable, they're going to just do it again. And they may start doing it again as early as 2027, January, if they get control of the House of Representatives, because those people have no concept of weaponized justice. They just will do it willy-nilly. And but this last week, Ben, I went to the hearing that Chuck Grassley had where Attorney General Pam Bondi testified. And Senator Grassley, as he's done now 3 times in his opening remarks to the hearing, he released another set of whistleblower documents, which was all about my arrest. And it was frightening to me. And I don't get frightened very often, okay? But seeing Durbin and Schiff and all of the Democrat senators start talking about how the Trump administration had weaponized the justice system. Hey, they put me in prison. They put Bannon in prison. They're trying to take the bar cards of John Clark and John Eastman and Jeff Clark. Mm-hmm. They cost everybody I know, Ben. Everybody I know and served with in that first term has paid a very heavy price. If they didn't go to prison, they at least had to pay hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. So this is a big issue. I'm glad we're talking today. And they had no business arresting me when I lived right next door to them.
I want to ask you about the theater briefly before we go on to the legal issues at stake here. I think people have an appreciation now that they may not have had prior to the experience coming out of the first Trump administration of how much the FBI in particular, but the forms of justice that we have here in America are engaged in acts of propaganda when they do some of these things. Particularly, I think people's eyes were opened by the Mar-a-Lago raid and by the idea that this is something. In the same way that you think of the old days of Elliot Ness having the newspaper man there with the photographer, just to see him crack open the barrels. It's one of these things where people, I think, now understand when somebody has this type of experience, the FBI wants you to see them in this context because they want you to predetermine their guilt before anything is actually argued in front of the court of law. To me, I'm not surprised to see, because of that, a number of people online who have complained about some of the cases that have been brought, most recently, of course, against James Comey and Letitia James, that they have not been subject to similar approaches, that they were have been allowed to surrender peacefully and do the normal professional thing. That doesn't surprise me, but I do think that there's clearly a difference there. Do you wish that there was more of that? Just what is Peter Navarro's opinion on that? Do you wish that there was more of the circus attitude, or do you think that that is a degree to which it's actually a sign of seriousness to not go down that road?
I love the question. Look, what I want in terms of accountability is for people who actually broke the law in very serious manner to be investigated. If the investigations confirm what I think we all know, they should be put on trial. They should be given what I wasn't given, Ben, which is to say a fair trial. As I talk about in I Went to Prison So You Won't Have to, I was stripped of every single defense before I even got to a jury, which is something I never thought could happen in America. I want to see them given a fair trial. And if they're convicted, I want to see these son of a bitches go to prison and not get their wrist slapped, because I was in with 200 felons who were in for crimes that are far less serious than, for example, what I believe Comey, Clapper, Page, Strzok, Brennan, Rosenstein, and Schiff, just to name a few, are guilty of. And look, Ben, the beauty of what we're learning now and what's in my book, I Went to Prison So You Won't Have to, is that my case unlocks the whole conspiracy. Why do I say that? There was the guy who put me in leg irons, following me here, the guy who put me in leg irons, who led the 5-agent team, is an agent named Walter Giardina. What we've learned now from whistleblowers is that Giardina is what I call like the Forrest Gump of the Trump conspiracy. And I don't use that term lightly, okay? But if you look at Giardina, you see the conspiracy. So follow me here. 8 years of a conspiracy either to interfere with the election in 2016, 2020, and 24 to prevent Trump from getting in, or once he was in, to take him out. So it starts with Giardina, the guy who put me in handcuffs and leg irons. Back in 2016, the Steele dossier comes to the FBI. Now, we all know now, this is a fact, even though CNN won't even admit this. Steele dossier was a fabricated document paid for by Hillary Clinton designed to falsely implicate Donald Trump in some kind of Russian entanglement. Full stop. Yeah. Fake as the day is long. When the FBI vetted it, one of the agents who allegedly did that, according to whistleblowers, was none other than Walter Giardina, the guy who put me in handcuffs. This was back in 2016. Now, that gave the green light to what? Crossfire Hurricane, which was the big Russia hoax investigation that Schiff lied to Congress about and released all sorts of sensitive documents, which he should go to jail for, okay? Then Giardina goes to the Mueller investigation for a couple of years. Mysteriously, his laptop gets wiped of all kinds of data, okay? Ooh, big mystery there. It was a pattern among the FBI agents who worked on the Mueller report to lose data on both their phones and their laptops. At the same time, Ben, I don't know if you remember this operation. It was called Crimson River, and then they renamed it the Red Masari. That was an Egyptian claim that somehow Trump had gotten $10 million from Egypt for a campaign. It's like it was total BS, no facts whatsoever. But Giardina and the FBI used that as a license to hunt, essentially subpoenas, phone records, emails, and all of that. It doesn't stop there, Ben. The biggest one was Arctic Frost, which was the whole J6 thing, which involved, now we know, the surveillance of Republican senators. Okay. And Pence, Trump, all his lieutenants, I bet you a lot of money that I'm going to pop up in one of the next tranches of that. And there was nothing there. But look, how do you do that? Now, I'll tell you one other thing, which I hope makes you laugh, okay? Because you can't make this up. You know who Walter Giardina's father-in-law is? No. It's a guy named Larry Potts. You know who Larry Potts is? He was the number 2 at the FBI, and he was in charge of the 2 worst scandals in FBI history, Waco and Ruby Ridge. Now, how's that for a family? Okay. So when you go back, the Sean Connery, like with the things in The Wire, it was dope on the table. Yeah, it's like, this is just wrong. This is just wrong. And Kash Patel is changing the culture there, but it's going to be very difficult because it's so entrenched. The DOJ, I mean, it's like we had a breakthrough last week where we finally got 100 people confirmed by the Senate in one piece, and a lot of those are going to DOJ. But Ben, we're fighting the deep state and a mindset that the ends justify the means, and they can put people like me in prison.
So I want to ask you one more question about this, and then I do want to save a little bit of time to talk to you about China. The thing that is currently the focus of debate that you are bearing witness to on cable networks and across social media is surrounding mostly the conversation around James Comey, to a degree the conversation around Tish James. And everyone frames these issues, pretty much the same way on the left and in the vaster part of the media marketplace, which is these are politically motivated, acts of lawfare, and this is ridiculous. These cases are ridiculous, et cetera, et cetera. To me, I think that they're kind of the tip of the iceberg, but more fundamentally, I feel like what people don't understand, and that what conservative voters and people who have paid attention to your situation and at the situation of several of the others that you've mentioned understand now, is that if the conversation goes along the lines of, well, this is political targeting. This, isn't the sort of case they would normally bring, blah, 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 blah. And then eventually, usually at the end of the segment, they get around to saying, now, of course, she probably did sign that, mortgage document, or of course, he was being, dishonest to Congress, and there's always this little element there. Yeah. Or at least sometimes it creeps through, not always, where they basically acknowledge, yeah, the person did this thing. We just don't think they should be held accountable for it. When from my perspective, the accountability has to be even higher for them in those clear positions, because otherwise the assumption is that these people are above the law. And we've heard nothing but 4 years of them saying that no one is above the law. And that gave them permission to go after Donald Trump and everyone associated with him and all of his defenders, including you, for anything that they could find, anything that they could attach a hook to, and certainly using, as you said, the public reporting or other false claims to justify wiretaps and investigations that were just designed to turn up something that they couldn't have known. What is your attitude toward the coverage that you see happening right now about the cases, the James Comey situation, the Tish James situation, and others like them?
Well, first of all, everybody who's coming to the defense of James Comey on the left, who's talking about how this is just political or weaponized, this was like, their lips were closed in my case. And the difference between James Comey and I, make this very clear, Ben, the difference between James Comey and I didn't break the law. I obeyed Department of Justice policy on executive privilege. It was my duty constitutionally to refuse the subpoena. On the other hand, Comey broke the law multiple times. Now, in the case that he's being charged with, it looks like a prima facie case of lying to Congress, full stop. That's a felony. But more broadly, if you look at the arc of history, he is guilty of 2 things: at least in a conspiracy, which would be eligible for RICO prosecution, by the way. He's election interference, because clearly all of the things that transpired with the Russia hoax were prior to the 2016 election. Mm-hmm. And then insurrection, because after Trump got elected, it was a clear case of trying to overthrow the Trump government. So that's serious. Here's the thing, what's interesting to me is like the way the left defends people. Let's take Lisa Cook, the Federal Reserve chairman.
Yeah.
I'm in prison. I went to prison so you won't have to. It's done in like diary form. So like 120 days, like what happens each day. Mm-hmm. There's a number of posts in there talking about guys I'm in prison with who did exactly what Lisa Cook appears to have done, which is to say, screw around with information in order to get a loan, right? Yeah. In her case, mortgage loans, in their case, business loans, okay? These are just poor schleps who are in prison for years, Ben. This is like a serious friggin' crime. They're not only in prison for years, they had their assets seized, their families kind of on life support, social welfare, food stamps. And even after they get out, they're going to be burdened with hundreds of thousands of dollars of restitution. Okay? They went to jail. Now, if I'm them watching TV, looking at Lisa Cook, and the left's talking about, oh, slap on the wrist, this is nothing, it's politically motivated, I'm thinking, good God, what is wrong with our judicial system?
To me, people who want accountability or say that they claim to want accountability and want trust and faith restoration in the FBI, regardless of ideology, they should be in favor of accountability. They should be the most in favor of accountability, because we're never going to get back to a point where the average American can have faith in the FBI or in the Department of Justice or in any of these institutions unless you go through that process, unless you have that investigation and have the decision at the end about, well, did they do this thing that it looks like in many cases you could say the evidence indicates that they likely did. If you don't have accountability in that vein, it goes completely against the whole argument that you want this faith to be in institutions again.
Well, I think that this whole debate now reveals the hypocrisy of the whole kind of thing. And more broadly, as we're seeing all these liberal judges stop Donald Trump from doing all sorts of things in all sorts of areas, it further undermines things. I mean, look, Donald Trump would have won the election in a landslide, full stop. But I do believe that my case, sending me to prison, sending Steve Bannon to prison, trying to put Donald Trump in prison for 100 years, that transformed the 2024 election fundamentally from an election just about the economy and inflation and the border into one that also included the weaponization of our justice system. So maybe I got the boss like 1 or 2 votes, but it's an issue.
That's a good way to think about it. That's a good way to think about it.
We've got to resolve. And look, I don't know if you saw my speech.
I did. Yeah.
At the convention. I mean, I walked on that stage having no idea what would happen. I didn't know if anybody knew I'd been in jail or anything. And when that crowd erupted as it did, it was like, wow, something's going on here. And the something was going on here is that people are pissed off and tired with these liberal judges who are using the court system and these liberal attorney generals and things like that. And by the way, I went to prison so you won't have to. It's not just the usual suspects at the FBI and DOJ. It's also like Alvin Bragg, Letitia James. I call them out by names. These people have names, Ben. They have names and they need to be held accountable. It's for one simple reason. They'll do it again. I'm an economist, right? So if you just think about incentives, it's like if they can get away with subpoenaing and holding everything up and doing what they do, then they'll just keep doing it.
Yeah.
And it's like it's sending people like me to prison. I mean, it's crazy stuff. But I was the third oldest guy in that prison. I'm the only guy, 200 guys there. I'm the only guy who's guilty of a misdemeanor. Everybody else a felon. Half the people are in there for serious, like drug and often gun-related offenses. And I wind up in prison. It's like, okay, made the best of it. The book, I think, will make you laugh, cry, and get angry, all that. But never should have happened, Ben. Not in this country.
Well, James Comey wrote an entire piece in his memoir about how important it was to prosecute Martha Stewart to send a message. And so I think that there's ways that
bad hombre,
come
Martha.
back to haunt you. Peter, just quickly, with the time that we have left, I know that you have been somebody who has been paying attention throughout your career to the importance of America's supply chains and to the issues that we have regarding our dependence on China. What is your evaluation of the current state of the tariff fight and everything that has been related to it in the first year of this second Trump administration? How do you think things are going? Where do you think things are headed as it relates to our relationship with China?
Yeah. So just so your viewers understand, it's like I started my China journey back in 2006 with a book called The Coming China Wars. Yep. Did a book and a movie, Death by China, in 2011, and then the military version of that, Crouching Tiger, in 2015. So I'm a close observer of that. Ben, if you want to know what the Chinese are thinking right now, and it's a fundamental sea change that all of us need to be aware of, you just have to read the Chinese press, which I follow closely in translation. And what they're saying to us, what they're saying to their people, is that they've made the decision to basically remove themselves from any dependence on the United States for agriculture or for any kind of chips or anything like that. So they're basically announced a decoupling strategy from us. At the same time, they've made no secret, and again, it's all in the public press, that they are going to use their production capacity, all the jobs and factories and parts of our supply chain that they stole from us, as weapons against not just us, but the rest of the world, Europe, India, other places around, to basically go on the next leg of their journey up to what they want world domination to be in 2049, which is the 100th year birthday of the communist Chinese Communist Party. So that's where this ship's heading, and what we have to do as a country is be clear-eyed about that and take appropriate measures, which the Trump administration is doing, which is to say that we have tariffs in place to defend ourselves against unfair trade, against the carnage, otherwise known as fentanyl, that kills hundreds of Americans every day and millions over the last some years. And at the same time, we're bringing home literally trillions of dollars of investment that's going to help us fill in the gaps in our supply chain. And the first term I was in, Ben, for 4 years, I'm only one of three guys, besides my good friends Dan Scavino and Stephen Miller, who were there for the whole time. I spent a lot of my time looking at gaps in our supply chain and figuring out how to bring those jobs back. And we just have to keep doing that. But it's a very serious matter. And there's just so many things going on in the world that are so serious that I'm just so happy to see President Trump, because he gets it. You know, he's able to multitask. You know, one day he's settling world peace in Israel and Gaza, and the next day he's trying to deal with the Russians and Ukraine. And then China hits us last week with an escalation in their supply chain strategy. So I just want to assure people watching this that we're clear-eyed, we're on the case, and that we're going to do what's best for the American workers, taxpayers, farmers, ranchers, and people.
Last question for you, Peter. I know that this is an issue that has been of significant importance to you over your career, and that you have been quite often a lonely voice on it within the Republican coalition, one that didn't necessarily have the ear of a lot of the people who used to be in charge of the GOP's economic policy. One of the questions about the future of the Republican Party after this second administration has run its course is whether a shift in approach to trade policy and to the way that the leaders of the conservative Republican coalition, the coalition of the right, view those issues is going to be something that is permanent beyond the person of Donald Trump. How confident are you that this presidency and that the experience through it in both of its terms has fundamentally changed the argument on this area of economic policy, that it will have that kind of staying power even when there's someone else, presumably, who's sitting in the Oval or who's leading the party going forward?
Yeah, I love that question too, Ben. Let's contrast where we are now with the first term as a way of answering that. So during the first term, I come in as the trade advisor working with Donald John Trump. Early on, I'm sitting in a cabinet meeting. The boss is wondering why we haven't gone faster on tariffs, and he goes around the room asking every cabinet secretary what they think about the tariffs. And then he asks the economic advisors like Gary Cohn, who's sitting in the room. And he goes around the whole room, and every one of the people there expressed reservations or outright opposition to the tariffs. And the only person in the room at the time who supported his policy was me, and for obvious reasons. And at that point, he has an epiphany, and we get moving and rolling. We put the China tariffs in, we put the steel and aluminum tariffs in. Things are rolling, but we get a lot of pushback from the media and from the economic think tanks. Oh, this is going to cause inflation. This is going to cause recession. I was like the target of 2 lead editorials in the Wall Street Journal, not the Main Street Journal, the Wall Street Journal, saying it was going to be the Navarro recession. They literally used that term, right? So none of that happened. All we got was prosperity, no inflation, and a bunch of tariff money, okay? Fast forward to now. It's like the left and legacy media is trying to make the same arguments, but they have no credibility, okay? That's the difference here. So one difference is Donald Trump has proved that tariffs and good trade policy work. And as he has brought in line deals with Europe, Japan, Korea, Indonesia, the Philippines, and just pretty much of the rest of the world, there's an acknowledgement that this is important, trade policy and tariffs work, and that they are here to stay. And the reason, and this is the punchline, the reason why they're here to stay ultimately is because they raised a ton of money, and they do it in a way which doesn't cause inflation or recession, and they help us turn what would otherwise be a very dire fiscal situation with a skyrocketing debt, thanks to Joe Biden, into something that's manageable, where we can actually reduce our debt, not continue to see it go up and pay exorbitant interest rates, where those service on the debt crowds out all of our civilian, road building, social security, everything in between, plus defense. Instead of that. So the answer to your question is it's here to stay as long as the Republicans are in charge, because even the rhinos who were against that on the Hill now like the money. They love the money. And since they're not seeing any downside and they're seeing these deals work, it's a good place. Now, having said that, there's a big decision that the Supreme Court's about to make with respect to our IEPA powers. the appeal that went through, Ben, I don't know if you read that, but the beauty of the decision, even though it went against us, there's a very strong dissent, which was unusual, but it's very well reasoned. It's a roadmap for the Supreme Court to support us. If we get past that with a positive thing, this country is going back to the future of Hamilton and Henry Clay and Jefferson and Lincoln, where tariffs were an essential part of our economic and national security.
Mm-hmm. Peter Navarro can be found for all of his different social things and everything related to his latest book, I Went to Prison So You Won't Have to, at peternavarro.com. Peter, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and for joining the Big Ben Show.
It's been a pleasure, Ben. And I'm looking at your thing back there, and it's Big Ben Show. It kind of looks like Big Ben in the back there, but that's what we all used to call the Trump Tower. I could see it from the house. I could see that in the FBI. So you take care of yourself. And I appreciate your time, brother.
Great to have you, sir.
If they come for me, they can come for you.
I think it's a shame. I think it's a disgrace.
When former White House advisor Peter Navarro stood on principle, he never imagined it would land him behind bars.
They demanded that I break the law.
But he refused to betray Donald Trump or the Constitution and paid the price as a political prisoner. Locked inside a Miami federal prison, Peter found two lifelines: postcards of hope to his fiancée Bonnie Pixie Brenner and a hidden multi-million-dollar prison scandal he's now exposing. I Went to Prison So You Won't Have to. Peter and Pixie share a riveting prison diary, a heartfelt love story, and a shocking look at injustice in America's prison system. Stand with Peter. Scan the QR code now or go to Amazon.com to order your copy.
I went to prison so you won't have to.